Avi is he has a consulting firm called Partner with Creators, and he runs the newsletter Creator Logic. He's got about 15 years of digital experience at places like William Morris Endeavor, Wheelhouse, and Patreon. Right next to me is Jim Louderback. He is the editor and publisher of Inside the Creator Economy. He's had some past gigs as the GM and CEO of VidCon, the GM of Discovery Digital, and the CEO of Revision 3. Finally, we have Char Modelle. She's an Instagram expert and founder of Brand Social Consulting. Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So I've got some big shoes to fill, Jim, because he's been moderating all day, so now I get to take over.
I'm the best. I just get to sit here and just
answer some questions. So, I think there's a lot of talk right now about, I have to build my own thing. I need to kind of get out there. But I'm really curious, and I want to ask each of you first, what drove you to begin building your own presence online? Was there a specific moment in time where you were like, oh, I got to do this? Was it out of necessity because you had kind of wound down a gig? And, what really prompted you and drove you to start doing what you do now and building your own brand? Jim, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. I'm totally by accident. Revision 3, Twitter came out. We were at South by. Everybody's like, Twitter. I'm like, yeah, whatever, Twitter. Created my Twitter account. Some of the people that I was working with at Revision 3 were some of the big, the folks who grew on Twitter to 1 million Twitter followers. Because I happened to be at Revision 3, it was like one of the collateral damage things. I turned around and I had 15,000 followers on Twitter without doing very much. And then the same thing on LinkedIn. I was running PC Magazine and Reid Hoffman came in before LinkedIn launched to tell us about it. And I was like, all right, I'll sign up for LinkedIn. I was like I was like user number 8,912 or something. And I just, a friend of mine was like, yeah, here's what you do on LinkedIn. Just, accept everybody's request. I did it. Turns around, I had 12,000 people on LinkedIn. And then I was doing a newsletter for VidCon coming out of COVID, just trying to get people to buy tickets. I started putting content in. A couple weeks later, they're like, LinkedIn said, we have a new newsletter property coming out. And I'm like, stick it on LinkedIn too. Why not? And that turned into 27,000 followers today. So absolutely 100% accidental.
Char, what about you?
Yeah, it was kind of the same for me in the beginning. I used content creation just as an outlet, and I really enjoyed it. And then people started asking me to manage their accounts. And then I realized the more content that I'm creating and the more I get out there, the bigger my business would build and my network. And so it really created more windows and doors of opportunities.
Avi?
Yeah, I would say that I started by responding to people's comments. I was job searching on LinkedIn while at another job and, saw people posting about stuff I knew about and disagreed with. So I started posting comments and then I was like, let me share my actual, because I'm like, what, this person is writing about something they're wrong. Let me share why. And that just became a habit. And without even thinking about it, I would go on, have a thought, post it, whatever. And then sort of overnight, but actually over probably 6 months to a year, I went from 0 to a few thousand people on LinkedIn. And then, when I became the head of creator partnerships at Patreon, that then sort of blew up because Patreon's a big company and creator partnerships is a visible, role. And, so then when, the market crashed, things went sideways, I left Patreon. I sort of was like, well, people are reaching out to me through LinkedIn, and every time I post, I get a few more messages. Maybe there's a business to be built here.
So then how do you kind of think about what your value proposition is? I mean, Jim, for you, right, it was kind of just on accident. You started doing it, you blew up. I feel like Avi, you were responding to comments. Char, you kind of were getting into it, but for people out there that are okay, well, how do I do this? How do I even start? Right? How do you even get into it to begin with, to think about what are you now thinking about as your own personal value proposition as you're continuing your journey as a creator and building your brand? Char, do you want to start?
I mean, if you're thinking about using it as just you want to be a content creator and you want to start collaborating with brands, think about the things that you're using and that you're talking about and that you're passionate about right now. Because it's organic for you to just kind of try to connect with those communities. You're already in them. As a business, though, we do a bit of market research. It's who do you want as your target audience? What are you planning to sell? Are you going to turn this personal brand into something more profitable? Because now entrepreneurs and experts are turning their business into content creating machines. So it's mixed in now. It's like content creators are entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are content creators. And so right there, it just depends. Where is your audience hanging out? Are they watching video content? Go to Instagram, YouTube Shorts, TikTok. Are they reading? This is excellent for LinkedIn, does like longer forms still. It's really good over there. They can do the carousels. And so it's like figure out where they're hanging out because that's the type of content you're going to create to reach your audience.
So Avi, okay, for you, right? So you kind of mentioned, the world kind of blew up, in terms of like what you were doing. So for you, as you're thinking about doing this full time and really building your brand, again, like what are you considering like your own personal value proposition and how are you defining that in terms of the kinds of things that you're putting out in the world?
So for me, the question was, what do I know better than 99% of people? And actually, what do I know so well that for me, it's almost boring, but for a lot of other people, it's like I'm, unveiling something that, is like brilliant for them, right? That's kind of the magic spot to be, right? Like I could do a creative partnerships deal in my sleep. But so many people, they're like, well, I want to get a creator to partner with my product or do an equity deal or this or that. And where do I start? How do I reach them? What should the deal look like? What should the terms be? Like all of those things, right? Easy for me, hard for them. Like low effort, high impact. So that's how I thought about or how I've come to think about writing, but that's also kind of how the value proposition for my business sort of evolved. It's like, what are the things that I can offer where people seem to want them? They come to me for them. They're like, how do I do this? I really appreciate your posts that are about these things. Well, hey, I could just do that for you.
And Jim, you come from, magazines, editorial from back in the day with PC Magazine. Do you feel like the transition to creating a newsletter and, really discerning and dishing out different kinds of bites and what's topical is what really drove you to start the newsletter or not?
Well, so yeah, in my magazine days, I had a column in PC Week and PC Magazine. I had a weekly column in PC Week and I like saying my opinions on things and writing columns and doing stuff. I even wrote for USA Today at one point. And when I started building businesses and selling them to larger companies, I found I couldn't do that anymore. I have so many columns I wrote when I was at Discovery that I just could not publish. Other ones at Viacom, because when you work for a big company, they're like, no, you're not supposed to have an opinion. But when we started doing, newsletter at VidCon that became Inside the Creator Economy, I realized that I found a loophole. I didn't have to say my opinion. I could just find other people whose opinions I thought were right and include that in the newsletter. And that way I could get my opinions out. So I also did a newsletter very similar to that at PC Magazine called What's New Now. So the format was familiar to me. But really that I started doing it and it was inspired because I was like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen YouTube do. I couldn't say that, but I could find somebody else who said it or, somebody like that. And
that explains why you link to me so much.
Well, now I can say whatever I want, but I still link to you because you're good.
Char, I think it's really interesting because with Jim and with Avi, right, they're doing a lot on LinkedIn, and not to say that you're not, but really you're leaning into Instagram, which I find to be really fascinating, especially from like an entrepreneurial standpoint. Can you talk more about why that platform for you?
Yeah, a lot of people when they're looking up businesses online, like if you're checking out a restaurant or if you're checking out something, you go, oh, what's your Instagram? Let's check this out. B2B is really heavy on LinkedIn. So it really just depends. But with the people that I'm working with, they're experts and they often want to sell a mastermind or a course and they're wanting to do it from like to a younger demographic, people that are starting out or trying to learn from them. So where do they go? They go on Instagram and they go on YouTube and they go on TikTok and they go on Facebook Reels. Reason why I chose Instagram was because it was the hardest. And I guess I just like the pain of it. No, it's because people don't know how to dominate that platform. And when you can dominate Instagram, you can transfer all of that content to multiple platforms. Figure Instagram out as the hub, and then you can utilize that same content on multiple platforms. And people grow so fast when they figure it out. Now, you might grow faster on YouTube Shorts than Instagram, But having that as your hub, when people go to find you, then they'll say, oh, I'm going to click and follow her there and share her information. People tend to share more on Instagram than the other channels.
Well, I think it's interesting now because LinkedIn is really starting to lean into video content and short form content, right? So like that translation for you might now be easier. You started harder, right? Doing kind of the reels, and now they're moving into more short form. For Jim and Avi, you know, Jim, I know you've done some video content, but how bullish are you or not as it pertains to the video component on LinkedIn?
I like doing video on LinkedIn. I like doing video, period, but I feel like it's a lot more forgiving on LinkedIn. You don't have to be all perfectly done like on some other platforms. Like, I just shoot it, pop it into script, give it a quick edit and pop it up. People seem to like it. So I don't know if I'm bullish or not about it for everybody, but I think it's interesting. I will say though, and I'm going to I want to hear from Avi, because the video short form stuff that they did only works on iOS right now on the app. And I'm an Android user, so I haven't even seen it, even though I put a lot of short form video up there just for fun.
Jim, you got to get that blue bubble, man. I don't know. What are you doing?
You can, I think you can do blue bubbles now, on Android.
All right. Well, then it's fine. It's in beta. It's like an early beta. So, you know, most people haven't even seen the video tab in Instagram. It's available to a very limited set of users. And as a result, it's not actually very useful right now. One day it might be. I think LinkedIn kind of has this like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing going on a little bit where, you know, they want people creating content. They're not really doing a good job of incentivizing it now. The way that they've talked about the algorithm is, there's a good interview of Jason Pfeiffer from Entrepreneur Magazine interviewing Dan Roth, who's the vice president of content at LinkedIn. That's a recent, and basically Dan Roth says like, you know, we don't want things to go viral in more or less words. That's not exact words, but like, so, you know, we want to reach the right people, not more people. The problem is, like, they're forgetting that there's a certain level of like a dopamine feedback loop required to incentivize continued posting, because like otherwise you're just going to be depressed, right? It doesn't matter if you get the same number of inbound leads, the same number of likes and comments. If your impressions number is smaller, you're like, well, I'm failing, right? And it's possible video could be a solution for that. It's possible that they release video with the same perspective, and then does it actually create much benefit? I don't know.
And that's the thing, like, what's the user behavior on LinkedIn that's going to incent people to watch video in that way? I put up a lot of videos on LinkedIn before this all happened, and people watched them, but not a lot of people were putting video up.
No, and I mean, the entrepreneurs that I work with, we launch personal brands. Our focal point is with video content. However, we'll connect it to like Hootsuite, and that content will still go over. And we recommend turning their blogs into longer form over on LinkedIn, where they like to read. They're not trying to get the quick form content. They really want to sit and have a connection and digest the information. And that content works really well over on Facebook still as well. The long form has translated really well there. And then Twitter, for whatever reason, the community on Twitter is very similar to LinkedIn, and a lot of the same tools, they work together on both platforms. So I think it's just knowing, like, instead of shoving the content where you think it needs to go everywhere, just utilize the platform. What is doing best? Not everybody wants the video content. They still want to read. They want to see that long form.
The other thing I will say, sorry, real quick, is that the video side, at least the video that I have seen on LinkedIn so far in this beta tab, is basically video broetry. And like, that's what LinkedIn has been trying to get away from, right? Like a year and a half ago, LinkedIn's brand was all broetry, right? It was like the like one line per sentence. I was on my way to an interview and I saw a dog about to get hit by a car, so I stopped and saved the dog. But I was late for the interview, and when I got there, the interviewer was the dog. Like that, those kinds of like ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like that's what the videos are now. So I'm like, did you just like put the kibosh on one thing and like in doing so completely change the dynamics of the ecosystem, only to release a new product that may end up just seeing the rise of that thing again? And so like, it's an ongoing process, I think, for them to like figure it out. And they're also balancing incentives across $4 billion businesses. That's the thing to remember with LinkedIn, right? Like actually that content feed is not important to them. It seems like it is, but they make most of their money by selling the premium accounts, by selling recruiter tools, by selling, their learning product, and then advertising is one of their $4 billion businesses. And so internally, there's also like all of these things in contention. And so that's also kind of something to keep in mind when you're like, well, they're obviously going to, you know, like the short form is for the views. Well, maybe, but maybe not, right? Like it's hard to know.
So, I mean, Jim, I want to go back to something that you said that really struck me because, you know, you started some of this when you were at VidCon, right? And that's, you know, for those that don't know, VidCon is a big, creator event that is owned by Paramount, right? So you've got a lot of corporate, people around you, legal people, maybe looking at you depending on what you're posting. So for those people that are looking to build their presence, right? They're working for a corporate entity. How do they balance being authentic with maybe what their corporate overlord would maybe want them to say or not?
It's a really good question. Like, how do you be on LinkedIn and not piss off the HR department and the comms department and your boss? I think some of the best ways to do it are to give back information to people. So think about a couple things. Hey, what are you passionate about? Sure. But think about if you're at the mid stage of your career, what do you wish you knew 12 years ago or 15 years ago that you know now, and write those tips about, hey, if you're an up-and-coming video creator, if you're an up-and-coming producer, an up-and-coming person in media, here are 3 things you need to know to get ahead. What are some of the things that you know in your business today that other people are always asking you? So somebody is always asking you like, okay, what's the best way? Think about what Avi was saying. Like he can do a creator partnership thing in his sleep. So many people don't know how to do it. What are those things that your unique knowledge that you can put up there where you're helping other people understand and get ahead in their industry or at your company, but don't start dissing on your competitors?
And then, Avi, for you, something we talked about before the panel, which I thought was really interesting, is, you know, you have this opportunity, right, to build out what you want the way that you want it without kind of the corporate overlord, right? And so can you speak to that in terms of like, where is the line? Is there a line anymore? Because you're you and you're saying what you want when you want to say it, but you also want to service clients and you don't want to piss them off. So I'm curious from your perspective, right, having transitioned from big corporate to kind of doing stuff on your own, like where is that line for you?
Yeah, it's a good question and one that I think about a lot. Like, for example, I don't think LinkedIn will ever sponsor me, because I'm very open about what I think about the changes that they make, good or bad. I think that like the beauty of the creator economy for me and the beauty of being a creator is that in many ways it is a form of freedom, right? Like I think that I personally feel that employment on the one hand, like used to be, well, you're employed, you're really making someone else richer with your labor, but you get the stability, you get the insurance, you know. The last 5 years have completely destroyed any, pretense of this relationship between employee and employer, right? Like now we know that employees are just as disposable as contractors, are just as disposable as, you know, trash at this point, right? And so for me, if you know, the only sort of stability there is at least knowing, well, assuming I am employed in 2 weeks, I know what that paycheck is going to be. Well, why not also be a creator and try to make some money on the side? And if you're making enough money on the side, why not just take the leap? And then you're in control. Then you could say, I don't want to work for this company. I don't want to do that project. You know, then you can say what you want and there will be consequences, right? There are consequences. Like you may not get the gig with the company that you criticized. They may never sponsor your content or you may never get to consult with them or whatever. We're all grown-ups, right? We understand that like there are effects to our actions. Just like if we were employed and we said something bad about our employer, they would ask us to take it down or they would potentially fire us, right? So I think it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, but the difference is that like I'm free, man.
But look, quickly, I want to respond to that because I think if you're an employee, and there's nothing wrong with being an employee at a company, you go into it eyes wide open, build yourself around the expertise that you have and where you want to go. So share content that helps other people understand that, and that as you do that, or comment, by the way, commenting is the unsung hero of LinkedIn, but do those things and build your credibility up as an expert without necessarily dissing on other people. That's a good way, because when that layoff does happen, now you've sort of got a reputation as being an expert in the field that'll get you hopefully that next job.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think you should ever build a brand around like dissing on people, right? Like that's not what I try to do, but what I try to do is be direct about
honest. You're very honest.
Yeah, I am honest. But like, for example, like I don't talk about, I have companies I advise. Obviously, if I'm an advisor or if I'm a consultant, like I'm not going to diss on them because I'm not an idiot. I know that
disclose first.
Right. Well, I know that would have a negative impact on my business, right? And so at the end of the day, for me, it's just about the like freedom to make those decisions, and nothing wrong with being an employee. My criticism is of the, this sort of pretense that we now have that has been disproven of this like relationship between employee and employer. It is no longer what it used to be, which is kind of sad, I think.
For sure. I mean, Char, for you, right, like you're helping others build their own brand voice. So how are you guiding them, right? Like, obviously you don't necessarily want them trashing employees either, like on the reverse end, right? So like, what are you doing in terms of guiding them? A little bit different, right? As somebody who's, literally the one building it and, but for you, you're helping them build it.
Yeah, sure. So transparently, the majority of my clients are already entrepreneurs that have had success in their own businesses. So they kind of like own their own truths. They've been through the 9 to 5. They decided to build their own thing. Now they want to teach other people how to get out of the 9 to 5 and do what they do in one of their businesses. So some of the things that we discussed, because I have had, I've had people starting out where they're still working for jobs and they're wanting to, launch something, and we set those parameters. Just talk, hey, let them know. Let's not make this a secret that you're going to be creating content. You're really passionate about them, and ask them what those boundaries are if you're really worried about damaging that relationship, because you can't go viral. You can't grow big and tiptoe around it. And you had mentioned, I noticed you said build boldly. Like, what does that mean? And I talk about building boldly. Like, if you want to build a personal brand, you want to become known, just say it. Just say, I want to be known as the expert in this field. Like, I want this for myself. And if your employer says, like, we don't want you creating this content, you have a decision to make at that point. But at least you're not trying to tiptoe around and be successful at the same time. I don't believe you can. And I think I want you to be able to sleep at night. And there's so many ways to deliver content. They would probably be very happy that you would shine a light on some of those topics. So I believe in working with those people because, again, like you said, I talk about attracting opportunities when you position yourself as an expert. People come to you when you're a content creator and you position yourself as an expert. The doors open up for you. You don't have to chase them down.
So I want to talk about kind of, actually making content, right? What does that take? How much time out of your day, your week, are you actually creating, right? To get the clients, to, get the ticket sales, to whatever you want to do. Like, what does that process look like for each of you? Because I think it's really easy for anybody to sit here and be like, I just create some content and put it out, right? And I get a bunch of people coming to me and I'm an expert. But like, I'm really curious, like, what is that process? What does that mean? And what is the time spent in order to create something that you feel will be valuable? Char, do you want to start?
Effing lot. Okay, here's the thing. I play big in the big leagues of want this thing big. And so right now I manage an almost 8-figure content team. I'm outsourced as a content strategist. And so I only know where to go from like 0 to big. And then I have a content team and I have 6 editors underneath me. And the thing is that it takes a lot of work. I'm not going to downplay the fact that it takes a lot. If you are a single person and you're starting out, just know that it will take several hours a week. If you can make money, at least $25 an hour doing something else, find a way to hire somebody at $4 or $5 an hour overseas to do some of that stuff that would take you hours and take them minutes. I look at the value of your time, because if you're spending 40 hours a week on something and it's not growing and you could be outsourcing that and making money in other areas, then you shouldn't be doing that. So I teach people how to scale and build content teams, because I think it takes a team to build something big. And there's no joke about it. So if you're doing it for fun, fine. Grab your phone, play with it, play around with some of the content creating tools, take a few hours, schedule it in. But if you want something serious and big, like, I'm not going to downplay the fact that that's an additional business. It's not just like a part-time job. It takes several hours. You want the content strategy. You want to know why you're posting. You need the content filming. You got to do the script writing. You got to actually do the posting, create the covers, and you got to edit the video, the footage, put it out through all of the channels. And then you want to review it, see if the analytics are working. I could go on and on. It takes a lot.
Jim, what about you? I know you're pretty avid about different tools that you're using as well. So thinking about just even you have a weekly newsletter that you're putting out. There's a lot of video content that you're doing. You're traveling the world, right? How are you deciding, how much time is spent in each of those pieces as you're putting content out?
Well, for me, it starts with my newsletter, because that's kind of the core of what I do. It's a weekly newsletter about the creator economy. It's opinionated, but there's other links. I spend roughly a day plus a week working on that, but all week long, when I see something interesting, taking the link, dropping it into my feed for next week's newsletter, and then usually on Thursday or Friday, sometimes on the weekend, I'll pull it all together and write it. But it takes about that much time. And I love your advice, by the way. I'm going to take advantage of that because I actually have something I want to do that I want to extend that out. I need help, and I'm going to go find it, do it myself. The other stuff just sort of happens organically. If I think about something, I'm like, I want to post about that. I want to do it. I want to make a video. I just go do it and I make the hour or two that it takes, but I don't craft finely. The thing I craft finely is that newsletter, and I still screw up. I screwed up a link today. I hate that, but I still screw up.
Avi, what about you? I mean, you have a newsletter as well. And, I'm curious for you, time spent and how that process works for you. And are there other things that you're looking to maybe branch into beyond that, podcast, et cetera, and how do you then figure out for you, okay, I want to move into this direction now, and it's worth that extra time because of XYZ reason?
So it's a fair amount of time. The newsletter Creator Logic has 2 sends a week. One is an interview with the creator about how they run their businesses. So what are the tools and the partnerships that they have? What are their strategies and tactics for making money? That kind of thing. And that's pretty involved because I have to interview the creator. And then, I have to pull quotes and figure out what the angle is and what the takeaways are and all that stuff. So that's I don't know, maybe 5 hours for that. And then the second send is me just thinking about some sort of framework or economics of the business and breaking it down in a way that creators and anyone else reading it can understand. And so that's maybe 3 hours. And then LinkedIn content. I probably post 5 times, give or take, a week. And those are maybe hour and a half each. Yeah. So it adds up. It's a lot.
Time.
Yeah.
It's a lot of time.
And the thing that I've outsourced, cause I also have a consulting business. I have a social media manager who I pay to edit cause I do the interviews on video. So putting that on YouTube, putting that on TikTok. We'll see. That's pretty new. It's still growing. And something I've been thinking about is does the format I'm doing for the newsletter actually work for social? And I don't know. So that's something we need to figure out long term. But, and then the other thing is I brought on a partner for my, consulting business, and that really helps because he's got a similar background to me, can do all the same things I can do. And so we can tag team, or he can take on a lot of the client management, all that stuff.
So then what was the trigger for you to say, I'm going to outsource this to this person? Was it just the time? It wasn't your thing because it wasn't something that you were necessarily an expert in terms of doing that? What prompted you to make that decision? Where were you in your journey in order to accomplish that?
Generally, I think about those kinds of things as where can I create the highest leverage? What is the thing that only I can do that is going to create the most value to drive the rest of the business? So for me, in these businesses, interviewing the creators, figuring out my perspective on on how to pull the learnings out of their strategies and tactics, writing those articles, same thing for the LinkedIn posts. Those are things only I can do. I can't outsource that. I don't have skills for YouTube or, TikTok or whatever. I don't have those kinds of things. That's to be outsourced. If I can find a partner who can do the account management, client management, and strategy work as well as I can, then that's not high leverage for me anymore, right? I can give that to him, and I can focus on what's the thing only I can do that will drive the rest of the business. And in this case, that's the content creation.
So who are you kind of gleaning inspiration from for each of you? As you're thinking about, okay, this is how I'm going to continue to grow my own brand and my own personal brand out there, is there anybody that you think is just like knocking it out of the park and doing it so tremendously well that you wish you were like, oh, I should have thought of that, or, oh, I can take inspiration from what they're doing?
Yeah, my former client I was with for 18 months is, I don't know if you've heard of her, Cody Sanchez. And I was her first social media manager, and we helped grow her brand. I was with her from 37,000 to 400,000. And so being a part of that team it was a mastermind. You either kept up and you brought to the table, or you didn't get to take a seat. And I learned how to sort of treat it as a business, because she was from Wall Street and she taught content creation as a business, and it changed. I was the type of person, I learned a lot that year. I had several clients, but she was my main focus. She was the one that taught me how to turn all the SOPs and processes that you need. So that way you're not spending all your time and hours trying to figure things out, that you have a process in place, a system in place that you can hand off to somebody else. So I have to give her some, credit for that. And she gives me credit for helping her grow that time. And, looking at her success now, she has millions of followers on multiple platforms, is pretty tremendous. But again, she took what she had on Wall Street and she put that in, the same work that she put in there. When she left, she put into her content creating.
Avi?
So I wouldn't say there's one creator where I'm I wish I could be like that. I talk to so many creators every week, and I'm always learning something from each of them. I think the hardest part is implementing all those things that I'm learning, because it's just not enough time in the day. So I try to get 1% better each day, however that adds up on a weekly basis. Or
sounds like the title of a newsletter. 1% a day, right?
It is, yeah. And that's actually the other place
I look up to, Phil Ranta.
Well, yeah, that's the other place I get a lot of inspiration, is kind of our creator economy circle on LinkedIn, all these, people that are now friends, like Jim, like Phil Ranta and others, who are posting on LinkedIn and then kind of talking to each other about how it's working, what we're learning and all that.
Jim, you mentioned one.
I look at newsletters and, Matt Navarra, who does Geek Out, is amazing. Leah Haberman, who does ICMYI, also amazing. I look at their stuff and I'm I learn a lot from them. Lindsay Gamble is another person we know on LinkedIn, but he does a really good newsletter. He's always poking on some good things. But, there's, Troy, what's his name? The People versus Algorithms does really interesting things. There are a bunch of just newsletter writers that I'm oh, I like that. I may borrow things or be inspired by them. Some are bigger than me. Some are smaller. All of them are better than what I do, so I just get inspired by them.
Awesome. One more question. In terms of leveraging AI, I know we've had a lot of panels here about AI. Are you leveraging that in some way, whether that's ChatGPT for ideation? How are you using AI in what you do every day?
I can start. I use Descript. I use ChatGPT for, I use it for Dolly. All of my cover images, I have fun making them on Dolly. I probably spend more time on it than I should, but I like it. Descript is really good for editing. I also have created a couple of custom GPTs that do things for example, I have one that I can give it all the notes on a session that I want to do, one of these events, and it'll spit out 4 different headlines and descriptions, which then I will rewrite. And there's another GPT that somebody else has that does SEO titles and descriptions. When you do a newsletter in LinkedIn, you can go in and add your SEO title and description that's supposed to be really good. So I've heard, and I don't have time to do that, so I just go and use this great little GPT does it for me.
Sure.
Yeah, we use Descript in a different way. We'll take the most viral videos and we'll take the transcription from that and then we'll plug it in ChatGPT and then we'll ask it to kind of remake it with our goal in mind. We'll be this is our target audience. This is the hook. This is the CTA. And then here's the script we want you to follow to create more like it.
That's really smart. Afi, what about you?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I know, right? There, you got the price of admission right there.
Something right there. So my writing, the core writing is 100% human made. I use AI for, I use Opus, for cut downs.
I forgot to mention Opus over there.
I use, I actually, for the thumbnails for my newsletter, I have this fun thing we do where we get a headshot from the creator and we put an AI cyberpunk background. And then I have an artist who actually goes in and highlights stuff and makes it pop. And so it's combination AI, real artist, and then a headshot from the creator, which I think is pretty.
You call that cyborg art?
I would say that it is, the way I credit it always is photo by creator, art by Johnny Fair with AI Assist.
Awesome. Well, that is time. Make sure you go check out Creator Logic and Inside the Creator Economy. Subscribe today to all.
CreatorLogic.com.
Thank you. You guys stick around because right after this, like immediately seconds after this, Ryan Graham and I are going to talk about Studio in a Box and building your studio.